Welcome to the third module where we discuss all things regulation. In this first section, we will discuss wastewater management and regulation in Pakistan. We'll start with some context on the wastewater management situation, followed by a summary of the political and legal system of Pakistan, including a history of the main laws relating to wastewater and environmental management. Finally, we'll look at some other key actors outside of the public sphere. Time for some context. During the last few decades, along with water scarcity, water pollution has been a critical issue in Pakistan. Untreated wastewater from houses and industries are directly dumped into drains or rivers. Wastewater dumping has been a threatening situation in big industrial cities such as Karachi, Lahore, Faisalabad, Kasur and Rawalpindi. The Indus River Basin has faced a high level of ecosystem deterioration. Untreated wastewater has been used formally and informally at a local level, mainly for agricultural irrigation, for decades. The largest manufacturing sector and the second largest employment generating sector in Pakistan is the textile sector. The textile industry makes up around 50% of Pakistan's exports, with about 600 to 800 textile factories producing final fabric. However, with around 1/3 of industrial effluent generated from the textile sector, these factories create high levels of water pollution by releasing it into the environment. In 2010, the total annual discharge of all industrial wastewater was estimated at about 7.6 billion cubic meters. The larger textile units are mostly located in Karachi, Faisalabad and Lahore, and most have only limited wastewater treatment capabilities. Although some laws and regulations exist in relation to water quality standards and environmental protection, some criticise the lack of specific water parameter requirements for discharge. Additionally, legal enforcement of the existing standards has been limited. This is often attributed to a lack of financial and human resources of the administering bodies carrying out and enforcing those rules, as well as political and financial pressure and influence to maintain a low level of regulation. It is also important to note that there are currently no laws, regulations or standards at the national or provincial level relating to the reuse of wastewater, whether treated or untreated. And hence, this section will concentrate on those laws that do exist in relation to wastewater management and environmental protection. Now let's look at the structure of the Pakistan state, its administrative institutions and legal framework. The most important document in this respect is the Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan from 1973. It mostly delegates to the provinces the authority regarding the use and control of natural resources. There are no specific references to relevant issues such as freshwater pollution, sustainable development, or agricultural practices, and thus any responsibilities not mentioned within it are typically delegated to the provinces or lower levels of government. We will see how the Constitution fits in the overall legal framework a bit later on when we look at a timeline of the major pieces of law in Pakistan relating to wastewater and environmental management. First, let's look at the structure of the federal government institutions as set out in the Constitution. Pakistan is a federal parliamentary republic with 3 branches of government: the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. The president, elected by an electoral college, is the ceremonial head of state. The executive is led by the Prime Minister, who appoints a cabinet as well as ministers and major civil servant positions that run the federal ministries. The legislative branch is composed of 2 houses, the Senate and the National Assembly, which are known collectively as the Parliament of Pakistan. Bills or new laws must be passed through both houses, achieving a majority vote before being passed to the President for assent in order to become a law. Finally, the judiciary contains the Supreme Court, as well as the High Courts and other courts and tribunals, including environmental courts. Being a federal parliamentary system, Pakistan also has similar provincial level government institutions in each of its 4 provinces. Each provincial unit has its own elected legislative body called a provincial assembly that sits in the provincial capitals. Legislative powers are shared between the federal and provincial governments. The provinces and the 3 federally administered territories of Pakistan are subdivided into a total of 39 administrative divisions. Each division is administered by a divisional commissioner appointed by the Government of Pakistan from the Pakistan Administrative Service. Below the provincial and divisional level, there are 3 local levels of government. These are the district, tehsil, and union council levels. The Punjab province is the most populous province with 127 million people, 42 districts, and 156 tehsils. In total, across the 4 provinces, there are 145 districts, 605 tehsils, and over 5,000 union councils. Decentralisation of government responsibilities over the recent decades, which will be explored shortly, has seen some shifts in the responsibility of wastewater management. Coming back to the federal level, the main relevant ministries related to water and environmental management include the Ministry of Climate Change, the Ministry of Commerce and Textile, the Ministry of Industries and Production, the Ministry of Planning, Development and Spatial Initiatives, which is responsible for the Bureau of Statistics, the Ministry of Science and Technology, and the Ministry of Water Resources. Additionally, the WAPDA, or the Water and Power Development Authority, is responsible for inter-province irrigation, water supply and drainage. At the provincial level, there are many different government departments that play a role in the different aspects of water, sanitation, irrigation, agriculture, industry, public health engineering, and environmental management. Some of these departments for the Punjab and Sindh provinces are shown on the screen. Pause the video to read in more detail. Now let's take a look at a brief history of some of the major legislation and regulations that have contributed to the current state of affairs in Pakistan. Several laws promulgated during the time of British colonial rule, such as the Canal and Drainage Act of 1873 and the Sindh Irrigation Act of 1879, set the scene for the development of the canal and drainage systems across much of the territory that would also be used for wastewater disposal and its subsequent reuse for irrigation. The Factories Act of 1934 also influenced industrial development and the practices of effluent disposal from factories, in particular with regard to the low level of attention paid to such discharges. The Pure Food Law of 1963 sets out food quality and safety standards for different food items, including agricultural products such as cereals, fruits, and vegetables. One major example of land development that shaped future practices was the project to irrigate the desert region of Tal in central West Punjab. The Tal Canal project started in 1939 and then, following partition in 1947, culminated in the implementation of the 1949 Tal Development Act. The law was formulated in part to complete the Tal Canal project and in part to provide land for the settlement of refugees. It was an historic event in the history of Pakistan, especially agricultural development. The Greater Lahore Water Supply, Sewerage and Drainage Ordinance of 1967 provided the legal guidance to establish an authority for providing proper drainage facilities in the cities of Punjab province. This set the framework for further developments in Punjab and other provinces in the future. The Pakistan Constitution was instituted in 1973 and set out the responsibilities and powers of each level of government: federal, provincial, district, and local. At this time, although there was some devolution of powers to the provincial level, federal institutions could intervene and maintain significant control over regulations and policies. The Lahore Development Authority Act of 1975 in Punjab province provided a legal framework for the functioning of the Development Authority in Lahore City, and the Punjab Cities Development Act of 1976 approved the establishment of the development authorities in other Punjab cities, which focused on issues related to industrial development, water supply, sewerage, drainage, and housing. Such development authorities could further introduce agencies to execute the functions prescribed by the Act, which they did by creating water and sanitation agencies, or WASAs. A quick note to expand on the responsibilities of the WASAs. The water and sanitation agencies operate in certain larger cities, generally as a subsidiary of a development authority, under public health engineering departments. These include Faisalabad, Hyderabad, Multan, Lahore, Rawalpindi, and Peshawar. Karachi has the KWSB, or Karachi Water and Sewerage Board, which has its own history of development as an organisation. The WASAs maintain and manage the drains, infrastructure and drinking water supply, and regulate the continuous pumping and drainage flow in drains. In rural areas, it's generally either the Public Health Engineering Department or a Tehsil Municipal Administration, or TMA, that manages these responsibilities. Coming back to the timeline and following the Provincial Acts of 75 and 76, we saw the introduction of the Punjab Water Users Association Ordinance in 1981 and the Sindh Water Users Association Ordinance in 1982. These ordinances provided, for the first time, the involvement of irrigators in water management roles through water users associations, although their role in decision-making remained limited. In 1997, both Punjab and Sindh introduced laws creating provincial irrigation and drainage authorities. The Punjab Irrigation and Drainage Act vested its authority with all powers relating to drainage and irrigation in the province, all powers under the Canal and Drainage Act of 1873, and other laws relating to these subjects were entrusted to it. Similar powers were vested to the Sindh Authority under its Act. Additionally, 1997 saw the passing of the Environmental Protection Act, which was the first legislation in Pakistan to deal with environmental protection. The Act provided the legal grounds to implement and monitor the goals of the National Conservation Strategy and to conserve renewable resources. The Environmental Protection Act provided the legal framework to establish the Environmental Protection Council, a high-level policy creation body, 4 environmental protection tribunals to manage breaches of the environmental law, as well as the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. The Environmental Protection Agency was responsible for the establishment and enforcement of water quality standards under the NEQS, or National Environmental Quality Standards. Under the Act, pollution charges on industries were imposed for discharging untreated wastewater into public drains. The agency was responsible also for the development of guidelines for environmental assessment of proposed projects, which included the Initial Environmental Examination, or IEE, and the Environmental Impact Assessment, IEA, requirements. The Federal Environmental Protection Act also allowed for the creation of provincial environmental protection acts and environmental protection agencies. Powers from the federal agencies can be delegated down to the provincial level. For major new projects, the submission of an Initial Environmental Examination, or IEE, and an Environmental Impact Assessment, or EIA, to the Federal Environmental Protection Agency became compulsory through the Environmental Protection Act. Regulations for the implementation of IEE and EIA were introduced in the year 2000. The National Environmental Quality Standards came into effect in 2001. These NEQS rules set out provisions for the submission of environmental monitoring reports by industrial units. The measurement of priority parameters were to be organised by industrial units themselves, and reports submitted on the basis of tests from an environmental laboratory certified by the Environmental Protection Agency. The year 2000 also saw a marked shift in the powers between the federal and lower level governments. The Local Government Plan of 2000, also known as the Devolution Plan, paved the way for the re-establishment of local governments at the district and sub-district levels. According to the plan, political, administrative and fiscal powers were devolved to the local governments at the union, tehsil, and district levels. It was urged that local governments would deliver municipal services like water and sanitation more efficiently once they were being appropriately empowered, staffed, and resourced. Through the promulgation of the local government ordinances by the provincial governments in 2001, 3 levels of government, district, tehsil, and union, were assigned powers, responsibilities, and service delivery functions. Municipal services such as water, sanitation, and urban services were assigned to the tehsil government. In reality, the devolution plan was not uniformly implemented and varied from area to area. In large cities, at the district level, development authorities and WASs under the public health engineering departments were responsible for the expansion and maintenance of water and sanitation services in urban areas. Additionally, district-level governments also had the authority to set up municipal offices to provide services like sewerage networks, treatment plants, and effluent disposal. At the tehsil level, Tehsil Municipal Administrations, or TMAs, would be in charge of supplying these services. However, the public health engineering departments continued to supply water and sanitation services in some rural areas, which saw some tension between the different levels of administration. Additionally, in 2010, the 18th Amendment to the Pakistan Constitution gave self-governing legislative and financial autonomy to the provinces. It further devolved some powers and officially shifted the responsibility of environmental protection from federal to provincial jurisdiction. The clauses of the Environmental Protection Act regarding IEE and EIA were still considered to be under federal authority, but other responsibilities shifted to provincial environmental protection agencies. Pakistan has seen some of the devolution plan rolled back or somewhat re-centralised since its inception. For example, under the Punjab Local Government Act of 2013, the Punjab Finance Department regained control over district government budgets. The shifting nature of the division of powers in relation to water and sanitation management over recent decades created some confusion around the implementation and management of projects depending on the location. In this third section, we're going to look at some of the other key actors involved in different aspects of water, wastewater, and environmental management. Scientific and industrial research plays a crucial role in the development of technologies and practices to effectively and affordably manage sanitation and environmental problems. The Pakistan Council of Research in Water Resources, or PCRWR, and the Pakistan Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, or PCSIR, operate under the Ministry of Science and Technology. These are public research institutions with centres and activity nationwide. The NIBGE, or National Institute of Biotechnology and Genetic Engineering, is a semi-government institute that has recently shown interesting developments with a floating wetland project at the Chakira wastewater treatment plant. Industry is a key player in relation to the discharge of polluted industrial effluent into drains and rivers. There are large industrial parks in major cities where many factories are located within a small geographic area. Textile factories have already been mentioned as a main sector within industry. Other sectors include chemical and plastics manufacturing, food and agricultural products, oil refining, as well as steel manufacturing, cement manufacturing, and car factories. The effluent from households and commercial users in urban areas is generally discharged into public drains. Legally, it is mandatory for each household who possesses land greater than 15 marla, or 379 square metres, to construct a septic tank within the premises. However, these instructions are not followed by most of the population, contributing to untreated effluent entering the drainage system. Urban and semi-urban farmers who irrigate their fields with wastewater, whether treated or not, are key stakeholders. Some farmers construct drainage channels directing flow from central wastewater drains to their field channels. Some farmers use pumps and piping to access wastewater from central drains. Irrigators may participate in water management through water users associations, although their role in decision-making is often limited. International institutions and funding agencies provide financial assistance for development projects in the irrigation, agricultural, and water and sanitation sectors. Examples of such projects in Pakistan are the Punjab Rural Sustainable Water Supply and Sanitation Project, mostly funded by the World Bank, technical assistance funding from the Asian Development Bank for the Wassa of Rawalpindi, loan financing of a new wastewater treatment plant in Faisalabad by the Danish government's development agency, Danida, the AFD, the French government's development agency, contributing to training and capacity building of water sector actors, funding for sewerage and drainage services in Multan from the Japanese development agency, JICA, and other projects from institutions such as UNICEF and the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, or the IUCN. Finally, there are international and local non-governmental organisations, or NGOs, that are sometimes involved in projects and reforms in Pakistan. International NGOs such as the International Water Management Institute, or the IWMI, the World Wildlife Fund, or WWF, and the Sustainable Development Policy Institute, or the SDPI. And lastly, we look at an example of the most immediate actors and institutions associated with wastewater irrigation for agriculture in two villages, Chakera and Kehala, in the city of Faisalabad in Punjab province. The different functions are shown in the boxes on the left, and the key actors are shown in the boxes on the right. The lines and arrows connecting the boxes show the main relationships between the actors and functions and between the functions themselves. Pause the screen to read in more detail.